Okay, hi, welcome back. So this is the first book of the second quarter, and we are reading 1 Peter. And 1 Peter, we think, is written by one of the disciples of Jesus, Peter. And so he was an eyewitness to Jesus and his life. And this book is said to be his life message. And that would be that you need to follow the example of Christ, his suffering. Because in the testing of your faith, you're going to glorify God and obtain eternal glory. And this is so interesting because if you've read the Gospels, you know that Peter betrays Jesus 3 times in the Gospels. Jesus says to Peter, "You're going to deny me 3 times." And Peter says, "No, Lord, I'll never do that." And yet, when Jesus is arrested, Peter denies knowing him 3 times because he doesn't want to suffer. And so then when Jesus comes back in John at breakfast in the sea, and he redeems Peter, and 3 times he asks Peter, "Do you love me?" And Peter says, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And basically Jesus, he forgives him and he commissions him to the world. And so it's so interesting that Peter's life message then becomes suffering for the gospel is worth it. He ends up being martyred on the cross, and he doesn't think that he is worthy to die the same death as Jesus. And so church history has it that he was crucified upside down. So it's really crazy who Peter becomes. And I really love his character because he's so straightforward and he's so relatable. And so reading this book is so different than the letters of Paul. He's a lot more direct. It's a lot easier to understand. And we think that he probably writes from Rome. And the reason of that is that he calls the elect in exile, and he mentions Babylon. And at the time, early Christians referred to Rome as Babylon because it represented the same ideas of sort of a people that have turned away from God and who are not respecting God's people. And so we think that he probably writes this around AD 62 to 64 because it's probably around a time that Paul is not in Rome, just because he doesn't mention Paul. Anyway, so that's a little bit of history of the book. And as I sat with it and just pondering, okay, this is someone who sat at Jesus' feet, who was one of Jesus' closest friends. What is it this message that he's writing to the church? And it's really beautiful. So the first section, from 1:1 to 2:10, he's talking about how they are God's chosen people. And what is that living hope that we have in Christ? And then he moves into this call of a holy priesthood. And what does it look like to be a holy people because we have a holy God? And then that second part moves into living as a chosen people. And so let your actions reflect Christ. And then when you are suffering, suffer for Christ's glory, because the way that you handle suffering will bring other people to the Lord. And I love that it's such a good application for us today. How do our actions bring other people to the Lord? How does our response to when people are mean to us or overlook us, how does that actually direct other people to God and glorify his name? It's still so applicable for us today. And so, there's so much beautiful imagery, and it ends the book by really talking about the chief shepherd and with the key verse that I've chosen, 5:10, saying, "And after you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you." It's so beautiful because you have that time lapse of you're going to suffer for a little while. But there's this eternal hope that we're looking forward to. And not only will we step into it, but we're going to be fully restored, fully confirmed, fully strengthened, fully established in Christ. And that's for eternity. And so we can maintain on this earth even though we suffer. And most of what Peter's talking about is social exclusion. And so actually that's what a lot of us can relate to today, is as a Christian, how are you being socially excluded or mocked? And how do you handle that social exclusion with this idea of an eternal perspective that Christ is worth it all? And so, it's very challenging and moving, and I really invite you to sit with this. There's so many great verses that we get here. Love covers a multitude of sin. Cast your anxieties on God because he cares for you. This book is full of little nuggets. I encourage you to read it for yourself. And just to remember that we're here on this earth for a little while, and we want to have that eternal perspective that Christ is worth it all. No matter what people are saying about you, what people are doing to you, how can you reflect Christ's glory through that? Thanks!